IT at Cork Tech Summit. Cork City Hall, 9th of May.
But that brings us on, ladies and gentlemen, to our first serious discussion point of the day, which is cybersecurity. And I've done a couple of cybersecurity events in the last couple of years. And as somebody who's a consumer, who is a punter, they scare the living daylights out of me. Because I thought that, I've now started using the Safari suggested password. And I think this is a major breakthrough for me because I no longer use my wife's name. So I thought I was doing very well. And then at the most recent event, they were talking about the rise of AI, and I realized that my wife's passport is not probably the best one to use. And then we moved to the next level, which is quantum computing, and I literally cannot get my head around that at all. But all of these things are going to be used by the good guys and the bad guys. And all of your companies are going to have to do the best they can to try and prevent the bad guys from getting in and stealing your information. It's a fascinating area, and I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion, which is coming up in a minute. But we are very lucky in Cork to have one of the global leaders in cybersecurity operating here. We have many companies in our cyber tech cluster, but to talk about the state of cybersecurity, the state of it, would you please welcome our first keynote speaker of the morning, the Director of Trend Micro, Mr. Bob McCardle. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks very much for turning up today, and I'm going to introduce you to the security part of this event. So what I'll cover in this short talk is I will give you an overview of what's happening in cybercrime and security today, and I'm also going to talk a bit about what's happening in the near future. As well as that, I'm going to give some advice on assembling a security team for your organizations, and the critical importance that diversity plays in a team like that, which is often overlooked, but the theme that you'll see going throughout the entire event today is on diversity. Also, I'll probably try and work in some Star Wars references because I'm a massive fanboy and somebody let me on stage with a microphone, stupidly enough. And as you can tell from your agenda, this is meant to be kind of like a more keynote style. So if you're waiting to take notes on how to configure firewall rules, you are in the wrong room and probably go find somewhere else. So we'll start and wake everybody's brains up with a few numbers. First of all, number 1.1 billion, if this rings any bells for anybody. So to explain this one, there is a government database in India called Aadhaar. And Aadhaar actually keeps records of all of the citizens in India. So essentially the government ID number, like our PPS numbers or social security numbers in the US. And that system was found to be exposed last year in a way that all of those records could be downloaded by anybody. So 1.1 billion people's records. To give you an idea, here in Western media, this didn't get that much pickup. We talked about things like MyFitnessPal and Marriott Hotels and Cambridge Analytica and things like that. But if you add all those breaches together, they don't get anywhere near this amount. And the problem with one of these things is people say, okay, well, let's just reset the passwords in all those accounts. Problem solved, right? But if it's something like this, you have details like your government ID number, your date of birth, your address, those type of things that you cannot change at any point in your life. Once they're breached, they're gone for good. And in today's world, as a consumer, data breaches are one of the most worrying things that you have to deal with because there's very little that you can do. It's outside of your control. What I actually personally do anytime I sign up for a website is I use fake addresses and fake like date of birth dates and details if they don't need them, right, if they're not shipping things to me. But you can't do that for something like a government site, right? That's just not an option for you anymore. And unfortunately, data breaches are going to continue to get worse and more common in the coming years. And there's one reason for that above all else in my mind. And that is this word, GDPR. Right, we got 3 slides into a security conversation. We had to do the GDPR. So hopefully everybody in this room knows what GDPR is. If you don't, you're probably at the wrong conference. So generally speaking, very quickly, there's fines associated with data breaches of, I think it's 10 million or 2% of your global turnover, or 20 million or 4%, depending on certain situations. So with that in mind, if you have a look at this table and think, what does this represent? So this is top revenue in Europe for companies. Or to put it another way, this is a league table of the companies to hack if you're an attacker today after GDPR is kicked in. So you simply take these companies, you multiply their global revenue by 4%, and any number less than that is an acceptable number to hit them with for a ransom. And that's a really important thing, because if you are in the ransomware game, one of your biggest problems is trying to figure out how much do you extort the person for, right? If you charge too much, they won't pay. If you charge too little, you always feel like you left money on the table that you could have taken. Whereas if you do this, you know that, okay, it's actually cheaper for them to pay me than for me to publicly disclose this information, and then they get hit by EU fine and all the brand damage and so on that comes with that, right? So as a result, we will see more and more of these sort of targeted attacks using this information in the near future. Another number, 2.7 billion US dollars in this case. So this is the total number of reported losses from cybercrime in 2018 to the FBI, $2.7 billion. And that sounds like a huge amount of money, but it's actually only just the tip of the iceberg for two main reasons. Firstly, this is just for the United States, right? And it's a big country, but it's still one of 200 countries around the world. The second reason is this is reported losses, not actual losses. So quick social experiment and to wake people up. Put your hand in the air if you've ever been a victim of cybercrime. A few people. Okay, let's make this a little bit easier. Put your hand in the air if your antivirus product, which I'm going to assume is the world-famous Trend Micro, by the way, if your antivirus product ever had a pop-up saying malware has been detected in your system. Hands up? Much more. Excellent. Right, keep them up for a minute. Right, keep your hands up if you reported that antivirus pop-up to the Gardaí. Right, nobody. I was kind of hoping one would, just to illustrate my point. But if even one person did, that one person is the equivalent of that 2.7 billion in the United States. So hopefully now you get an idea of just the sheer scale of crime that's happening today. And as well as that, the types of crime is actually evolving. So in the early days of computer hacking, you had mostly kind of skilled hackers doing it for fun, or for curiosity. That was up until about the early 90s. Then the next 20, 25 years or so were dominated by malware, by code. So people created code that would do the hacking for them, create botnets and worms and so on. And that's generally what the kind of classic antivirus software was developed to stop. But now it's gone full circle again, and what you're actually defending against is skilled human attackers, who are more skilled than at any point in history up to this point. So this is getting much more difficult to defend against, because you're not defending, they might use malware, but it's just one of the many tools they use. So it'd be like having a riot shield to defend yourself that only works against hammers. And then one guy turns up with a gun, and another guy turns up with a chainsaw, and your defense doesn't work, right? So you need to defend in different ways than we did in the past. So one final figure, just to wake people up again. This one's 8.4 billion. So 8.4 billion is the number of connected IoT devices, internet-connected devices that were in the world by the end of last year. That's more than the number of humans for the first time. It's also expected to rise to about 125 million by 2020. Now that means two things. Firstly, when all of those machines gain sentience and create Skynet, we're all dead. Secondly, and this is just as important, all of those, so everything in the world is becoming more and more connected. And when things become connected, that means that they can be hacked. So whether it's something like a PC, a mobile phone, TV, baby monitors, cars, ships, planes, come on, catch up, even how we vote, right, elections, all of these can and have been hacked, all recently. So as we connect things, they get more and more hackable. And IoT attacks are really only in their infancy at this stage. So to give you an idea, this is a recent enough story from a few weeks ago. A flaw was discovered in 2 million IP cameras around the world. I say a flaw, it's pretty much a default login and password issue, right? So all of those 2 million machines could be taken over by an attacker anytime that they wanted to. And this shouldn't be a surprise, because if you buy a camera on Amazon for 30 bucks, do not expect that a lot of investment has gone into securing that thing from the company that made it, right? So if you had 2 million cameras at your disposal right now, what could you do with it? If you think I could extort people by looking at videos of them, congratulations, you're now thinking like a hacker. But you're not thinking like a criminal. Because for a criminal, that's a terrible business model. You have to figure out a way to watch 2 million feeds of video every day, looking for that 1 second where somebody does something incriminating, probably normally gets naked or something to that degree. Then you need to figure out a way to identify that naked person in the real world, come up with a way of contacting them, in their native language, extort them, and get money from them in a way that leaves no paper trail. If you go to Dragon's Den with that, they will not invest in you. That is a terrible, terrible business model. What's better to do is use all of those cameras for what they really are, which is essentially crappy low-power PCs. And then just use them for something like a denial of service attack, have them all attack a single victim, and now your extortion model is much easier to manage. You have one guy you have to deal with, as opposed to millions and millions. And that's exactly what's happening. So just last year, we saw the largest denial of service attack ever in the history of the internet, 1.3 terabytes a second against GitHub. We've even seen entire countries knocked offline. In 2016, briefly, Liberia was taken offline. It's not the biggest country in the world, but it's still a country that was taken offline by an IoT botnet. And IoT botnets are continuing to evolve into newer ways of attacking. So for example, one of the more recent trends is to attack routers, just change the DNS settings, and then uninstall the malware. And you go about browsing the internet as perfectly normal and all of your sites work, apart from when you go to certain select bank sites or sites with logins that the attackers wanted, and then you get redirected to a phishing page. And that's the only change that was made. So good luck actually finding something like that and defending against it. And in today's world, technology is getting more and more integrated into our lives than ever before. And I'm not just talking about personal area networks like this one, I mean the internet itself. And the internet is spreading and growing quicker than at any point so far in history. To give you an idea, every day humans upload 2.5 quintillion bytes of information, which is a pretty mind-blowing number, right? Actually, it's not, because first of all, you're thinking, what the hell is a quintillion? Secondly, you're thinking, is that a real number? Did Bob just make it up? And third, you're thinking, what's that in floppy disks, right? So to give you an easier number, last 2 years, 90% of all of the data ever generated by mankind was generated. 90%. And what is a human's default reaction when you confront it with that much information and all these new threats that they've never seen before? Unfortunately, it's fear. Right? Your brain has had millions of years to develop a fight or flight response, and it's had 30 years to figure out how to deal with this deluge of information coming at it from the internet. And that is a really big problem because the internet is rising and there's even more of this coming. And also, fear is a very bad reaction from a society. Fear leads to anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering, right? So, Star Wars references aside, Yoda's onto something here. You go to any internet-connected community in the world, right, whether it's a forum, a country, whatever it is, and you will see fear everywhere. And that leads to anger and the kind of darker side of humanity. We even see a rise in targeted attacks between countries against each other, with normal businesses getting caught up in the crossfire as a result of all of this. And as I mentioned earlier, we're living in a world where you're now dealing with more skilled attackers than at any other point in human history. So how do you defend yourself against these type of attackers? Right, what is the perfect kind of security team for something like this look like? Or is there a course you can send people on, right, to learn this stuff? Well, actually, yes and no, right? Education is critically important when it comes to securing things for a couple of reasons. And luckily, we're actually very lucky to have some very good courses here in the Cork area, right? So in cloud computing, computer security from the likes of CIT and UCC and others. So there's really good courses available on our doorstep here. And education removes that uncertainty around technology that causes the fear in the first place. So it's of critical importance to get education right. And so if you think about it, is there a perfect security mindset that exists that you want on a security team? Well, they're not really, right? And I'll give you a clue. Nobody in this room is adequately prepared to defend their company against security attacks today. No one, and I include myself in that. However, groups of you most definitely are, right? It's critical when you build a security team today, whether it's on the defensive side, attacking side, research, whatever, you make it as diverse as possible. So I'll give you one example from a team I know well, which is the one I work on. By no stretch of the imaginations are we the perfect setup, but it's the one I know easiest or know the best to talk about. And we've learned a lot along the way, so hopefully I've got some tips that will be useful for you. First of all, our team is built from 14 different countries around the world. And we do that for two reasons. One is we want to get the best people we can, but the second reason is to see the world through all those different cultures. So if you look at the media today in cybersecurity, you will have lots of stories about Russia is hacking everything. So what do? we hire 1 or 2 people who are native Russian speakers so we can see the world through their lens. Or China, or hacking everything and stealing state secrets. Okay, you hire somebody from China, and while you're at it, we get somebody from Taiwan as well, so we get both sides of that cultural divide. Right? Or we mentioned IoT is spreading everywhere. And if you think that, you're thinking with a Westerner's worldview. One of the best analysts in our team is based in Brazil, where many people don't actually have internet access, let alone any sort of IoT devices. But having said that, they've got low wages and actually some of the highest rates of cybercrime in the world. So they've actually evolved some of the best IoT attacks that we've seen so far today. And all of that diversity is of kind of critical importance, whether you're building a research team like I'm on, whether you're building a defensive infosec team, or something more offensive like a pen testing red team and so on. Heck, even probably one of the best analysts in our team is a PhD in theoretical physics with no formal computer background whatsoever. And that's actually becoming more an important trend. There's so many free online courses available today that if you're like a teenager or earlier on in your career and you're looking to go to college someday and do computer security, there is no excuse for you to wait until college to start doing college courses. There's so many excellent material. In fact, if you do, you're probably going to be about 4 or 5 years behind your peers. And that also means that colleges will need to adopt to that as well, knowing that the good students coming in don't just have whatever was taught in the Leaving Cert curriculum, they have a whole bunch of extra stuff on top, or streamline them somehow and have them skip classes or something to that effect. And on top of that, you don't just need different cultures in a security team, you need different ways of thinking, right? Different mental models. And I'm not just talking about male or female here, although you absolutely do want to have that split, because millions of years of evolution, again, we don't think exactly the same way. We do prioritize things in different ways, and we look at the world in slightly different ways. And that is really important when it comes to solving kind of security problems. But if you do all that, you've just surrounded yourself with a team of really clever people. But they're also really boringly neurotypical. Right? The diversity of human brains is much wider than just sex, education, and culture. Right? There's, for example, take the autistic community. Some of the best people I know and friends I have in the security business are passionate about security and combine that with the unique kind of autistic brain they have to solve problems that I guarantee 98% of this room could not think about in the same way. And that's just one form of neurodiversity. There's a whole bunch of others out there as well. Right? So when we think about it, the problems we are facing at the moment haven't existed for the vast majority of human history. So what makes us think that the vast majority of human brains are the right ones to solve that problem? Right? You need that diversity. So what you need to do if you're assembling a team that can deal with all these advanced threats and new emerging things like IoT and that volume of data and so on is, to use the Steve Jobs quote here for a minute, to think different, right? You know that one. But you need to go beyond this. You need to embrace different. In fact, you need to affect that. You need to celebrate different. That is how you build a team that can really adequately cope with this. So I'll finish with one final message, which I think is important because it's often overlooked. And that is, cybercrime is not a computer problem at all. Cybercrime is just crime on the internet. It's a human problem. Today, you do not defend against computers when you're being attacked across the internet. You're defending against smart humans. And the best way I know of to defend against smart humans is assemble a diverse team of people across different cultures, ways of thinking, and make a very agile, diverse security team that can cope with anything that attackers throw at it, either right now or as trends continue to evolve in the near future. By the way, if anybody meets me later on, I have not yet seen Endgame. If you spoil it for me, I will murder you, right? And with that, thank you very much, and I will turn you over to the rest of the text.
Thank you very much indeed.
IT at Cork Tech Summit. Cork City Hall, 9th of May.